The door was already open. That was the first thing police noticed when they entered the house in the quiet Utah neighborhood. It was still dark outside. The air was cold. The home should have been silent, but something was wrong. A bedroom door stood wide open, and the bed inside was empty. A teenage girl was gone. Her name was Elizabeth Smart. She had been taken from her own home while her family slept just a few feet away. There were no screams heard by the neighbors, no broken windows, no signs of a fight. Just an open door, a missing child, and a family frozen in shock. Police knew right away that this was not a runaway. This was an abduction. And the truth about who did it was hiding in plain sight. But no one knew that yet. As officers moved through the house, they found something that made the situation even more terrifying. Elizabeth's younger sister had seen the man. She had woken up during the night. She saw him standing in the bedroom. He told her not to scream. He threatened to hurt her family if she made a sound. Then he took Elizabeth and disappeared into the night. The entire city woke up to the news. A child had been taken from her bed. Parents locked their doors, schools went into alert, police from different departments rushed in. Local officers, state police, and federal agents all joined the search. But the man who did this did not leave behind fingerprints. He did not leave behind DNA. He did not leave behind a clear trail. He left behind fear, and one small detail that everyone would overlook. For days, the search spread across Utah. Volunteers knocked on doors. Helicopters scanned the mountains. Dogs followed scent trails that went nowhere. Posters with Elizabeth's face appeared on every street corner. Her family begged for answers. Her parents spoke to cameras with shaking voices. They asked one simple question: why did this happen? Who could do this? The police asked the same question. At first, investigators believed the kidnapper must be a stranger, someone watching the house, someone who planned the crime carefully. The door was unlocked. The alarm was not triggered. The timing was too perfect. But there was a problem with that theory. Elizabeth's sister remembered something very specific. She remembered the man's voice. She said it was calm, controlled, almost familiar. That detail stayed in the case files, but it did not stand out yet. As days turned into weeks, the case became national news. The FBI joined the investigation. Different agencies shared information. Tips flooded in from across the country. Sightings were reported in cities far away. Each one raised hope. Each one ended in disappointment. Elizabeth was still missing. Behind closed doors, investigators began rechecking everything. They reviewed who had been near the family before the abduction, who had worked around the house, who had been trusted. That was when one name appeared again.
Months earlier, he had done work around the Smart family home. He was known in the neighborhood. People had seen him before. He had talked to the family. He did not look dangerous. That was the problem, because no one expects danger to come from someone they recognize. Mitchell had once spoken strange religious ideas. He had been fired from jobs. He wandered the streets dressed in old robes. People thought he was harmless, just odd. Police interviewed him early in the investigation, and then they let him go. At the time, nothing connected him directly to the crime. No evidence, no witnesses willing to speak, no proof. The truth stayed hidden. While police searched for answers, Elizabeth was still alive. She was being held in the open, walking through public spaces, seen by strangers, but no one recognized her. She had been forced to change her appearance. She was told never to speak. She was warned that her family would be hurt if she tried to escape. The country was looking for her, and she was right there.
That is what makes this case so terrifying. As weeks passed, Frustration grew inside the investigation teams. Agencies shared updates. They compared notes. They reviewed every lead again and again. Interagency cooperation became the only way forward. No single department could solve this alone. Then, something unexpected happened. A member of the public reported seeing a young girl with two adults who seemed strange. The girl matched Elizabeth's age. Her behavior was quiet, afraid. This time, the tip did not get ignored. Police stopped the group, and suddenly, everything changed. But before officers could confirm the girl's identity, before Elizabeth could speak freely, before the full truth came out, something shocking happened that would test the case, the evidence, and the entire justice system. Because even after she was found, the fight was far from over, and the biggest challenge was still ahead. The truth was about to come out, but first, someone would try to deny it ever happened. And that is where the story takes a darker turn.
The moment police stopped him, time seemed to freeze. The man stood tall and calm, dressed in long robes. The woman beside him looked nervous, and between them stood a young girl, her head down, her face hidden by layers of clothing. To the officers on the street, it looked strange, but not dangerous. Just another odd group. But something did not feel right. One officer looked closer at the girl. She avoided eye contact. Her body was stiff. She did not speak. When the officer asked her name, she hesitated. That pause changed everything. Police separated the group. They asked the girl to step aside. She was shaking. Her voice was barely a whisper. But when she finally spoke, she said words that stopped everyone cold. "My name is Elizabeth Smart." After 9 months of fear, questions, and dead ends, she had been found alive. News spread across the country within minutes. A missing child taken from her bedroom had been standing in public the entire time. People felt relief, then anger, then disbelief. How could this happen? How could she be missing for so long and still be right there? As Elizabeth was taken to safety, police arrested Brian Mitchell and his wife, Wanda Barzee. The case that once seemed impossible suddenly had names, faces, and a story. But the hardest part was still to come, because finding Elizabeth was only the beginning. As investigators began building the case, they faced a painful truth. Many people had seen Elizabeth during her captivity. She had been in parks, on buses, in public places, but no one realized who she was. Her captors had used fear as a weapon. They told her that if she spoke, her family would die. They controlled what she wore. They changed how she looked. They trained her to stay silent. And silence worked.
When Elizabeth returned home, she was reunited with her family. It was emotional, powerful, but she was not the same girl who had been taken. She had lived through months of fear and control, and now she had to relive it all again because the justice system needed her voice. Police began questioning Brian Mitchell. At first, he spoke freely. He talked about religion. He talked about visions. He talked in circles. But when asked about Elizabeth, his story changed. He denied everything. He claimed Elizabeth came with him willingly. He said she was part of a religious calling. He said nothing illegal happened. Investigators knew this was not true, but knowing and proving are not the same thing. The case depended on evidence, and there was a problem. There were no fingerprints from the night of the abduction, no cameras inside the home, no physical proof that clearly showed how Elizabeth was taken. What the case did have was Elizabeth's testimony, and that would become the center of everything.
Lawyers prepared for a long battle. Mitchell's defense argued that he was mentally unfit to stand trial. They said he did not understand right from wrong.
They claimed his beliefs controlled his actions. Months passed, then years. Elizabeth waited. Her family waited. The public waited. Every delay reopened wounds. Every court date brought new fear. Would justice ever come? During this time, something important happened behind the scenes. Different agencies worked together more closely than ever before. Local police, federal investigators, psychologists, and prosecutors shared information. They compared records. They built timelines. They worked as one team. That cooperation mattered, because as they dug deeper, they uncovered something chilling. Brian Mitchell had been on police radar before. He had been questioned early in the case. His name was known. His voice had been heard. Elizabeth's sister had described the kidnapper's voice as familiar. That detail had been there from the start, hidden in plain sight.
If agencies had not shared information, that detail might have stayed buried forever. Now it became clear. The crime was not perfect. It only looked that way. The truth had been waiting. As the trial approached, Elizabeth made a decision that would shock the nation. She chose to testify. She would face the man who took her. She would speak. The courtroom was silent when she entered. Cameras were not allowed, but everyone understood the moment. A young woman, once silenced by fear, was about to tell the truth. Her voice was steady. She described the night she was taken, the threats, the control, the months of captivity, the fear that followed her every step. She did not exaggerate. She did not shout. She simply told the truth, and that truth was powerful. The defense tried to break her story apart. They questioned her memory. They questioned her understanding. They questioned her strength. She did not break.
The jury listened. The country listened. But still, the case was not over, because one final decision remained. Would the court believe her? Would justice finally be served? As closing arguments approached, one unexpected move by the defense threatened to change everything again. A claim so serious that it could delay the trial even further. And once again, Elizabeth and her family were forced to wait. The truth was finally being heard, but freedom was still not guaranteed. The courtroom held its breath. The defense made one last move. They claimed Brian Mitchell was not mentally fit to be judged. They said his strange beliefs ruled his mind. They argued that he could not tell right from wrong. If the court agreed, the trial could be delayed again, or worse, justice might never come.
For Elizabeth and her family, it felt like the nightmare was starting all over. Once again, the truth was in danger of being buried. Psychologists were called in. Doctors examined Mitchell for months. They watched how he spoke, how he acted, how he answered questions. Some said he was deeply disturbed. Others said he knew exactly what he was doing. Behind the scenes, agencies worked together carefully. Prosecutors shared reports. Experts compared notes. Every detail mattered now. This was not just about punishment. It was about proving the truth in a system that demanded proof. Elizabeth waited. She had already survived the worst moments of her life, being taken from her home, being controlled by fear, being silenced in public while the world searched for her. But this waiting felt different. This was about whether her voice would truly be heard. During the hearings, Mitchell showed flashes of control. He argued with the judge. He corrected lawyers. He made demands. These moments mattered. They showed awareness. They showed choice. Slowly, the picture became clearer. The court ruled that Brian Mitchell was competent to stand trial. The case could move forward. For the first time in years,
Justice felt close.
When the trial resumed, Elizabeth returned to the courtroom. She did not have to speak again. Her earlier testimony stood strong. It had not changed. It had not broken. Prosecutors laid out the full story, the planning, the threats, the control, the months of captivity. They showed how Mitchell had taken Elizabeth from her home and kept her under constant fear. They showed how he hid her in plain sight. The defense had little left to argue. The jury deliberated. Those hours felt endless. Elizabeth sat with her family, holding her breath. Outside the courthouse, people waited quietly. This case had followed the nation for years. Now it was coming to an end. Finally, the jury returned. The verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. Brian Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The words echoed through the courtroom. Life in prison.
For Elizabeth, it did not erase the past. It did not undo the fear. But it did something important. It acknowledged the truth. It said that what happened to her mattered. After the trial, Elizabeth chose a path no one expected. Instead of disappearing from public life, she spoke out. She shared her story. She talked about survival, about fear, about strength. She helped change how the country talks about kidnapping and abuse. She worked with law enforcement. She helped train officers. She showed how important it is to listen, to notice small details, to work together. Because her case proved something powerful. The truth was always there, hidden in plain sight. A familiar voice, a known face, a man seen before, a detail that almost stayed buried. If agencies had not shared information, if someone had not spoken up, if police had not stopped that group on the street, Elizabeth might never have come home. This was not just a story about a crime, it was a warning.
Evil does not always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks familiar. Sometimes it walks past us every day. And sometimes the smallest detail can change everything. Elizabeth survived. Justice was served. But the lesson remains. The truth does not disappear. It waits, and it always finds a way to come out.
Before we dive in, smash that subscribe button, hit like, and comment below if you think survival should have been possible, because what happened next on Austria's highest peak will haunt you. The icy wind howled across the Großglockner, Austria's tallest mountain, carrying a bitter warning to anyone daring enough to climb in winter. Snow swirled like ghostly ribbons around the jagged summit, and the darkness was absolute, except for two small pinpricks of light, headlamps cutting through the storm, inching upward, step by treacherous step. Kirsten G. was 33, exhausted, her breath shallow and uneven. The snow under her boots shifted unpredictably, threatening to collapse beneath her weight. Her boyfriend, 36-year-old mountaineer Marcus L., moved with practiced precision, each step deliberate, confident. He had planned this climb. He knew the mountain. He knew the risks. And yet, something in the way he glanced back at her unsettled her. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The climb was supposed to be a challenge, a thrill, a shared conquest. But now, it was a nightmare. Kirsten's hands were numb, her fingers barely able to grip the ice axe. Her legs shook uncontrollably. Marcus, sensing her faltering, spoke softly. "We're almost there, just a little further." But his voice, calm and measured, carried a weight she couldn't place, a weight that didn't belong to someone who truly intended to help. Behind them, the webcam perched on the mountain lodge captured the ascent in chilling clarity. It recorded two headlamps climbing steadily. Hours later,
it would show only one descending, the other vanishing into the storm as if it had never existed. Kirsten stumbled again, falling against a ridge of ice. Marcus steadied her, his hands firm. "You need to move," he said, urgency creeping in. But the snow was merciless, the wind slicing at her face, and her body screamed for mercy it would not receive. Every second stretched into minutes, every breath a battle against hypothermia. By the time they reached roughly 50 meters from the summit, it was clear Kirsten could go no further. Her body refused to respond. She collapsed against the icy rock, the storm claiming her energy faster than she could fight. Marcus looked down at her, the cold reflection of the snow masking any emotion in his face. Then, inexplicably, he did something that would shock the mountaineering world. He turned and started down the slope alone. The webcam captured the moment with horrifying precision. Kirsten's light disappeared into the darkness, leaving the screen hauntingly empty except for Marcus's descending figure. At that moment, the mountain became a silent witness to what prosecutors would later call an unimaginable act of neglect. Back in the valley, authorities began to piece together what had happened. Emergency calls, witness statements from other climbers, and the footage from that cold, lifeless camera started forming a picture of a night gone wrong. But even the investigators were unprepared for the evidence waiting at the summit. Something they had not anticipated. A clue so damning it could change everything. And that item would change everything. The chill of the Grossglockner had not just frozen Kirsten's body, it had frozen the truth in place, waiting for investigators to uncover it. When the Alpine rescue team arrived at the desolate ridge, they were met with silence and snow thick enough to swallow footsteps. The wind had erased almost everything, but the one item left behind refused to be ignored. A split board, Kirsten's only piece of gear, abandoned carelessly in the snow. At first, it seemed innocuous, a piece of sporting equipment, but forensic experts quickly realized its significance. The splitboard had been positioned in a way that suggested it had been used as a last-ditch attempt to shelter her body from the wind. Whoever placed it there knew the mountain, knew the dangers, and yet it hadn't been enough to save her. Marcus L. had returned to the valley by himself hours earlier, claiming he had gone to fetch help. But as investigators examined his story, discrepancies began to pile up like the snowdrifts on the ridge. GPS data from his phone and smartwatch showed precise movement patterns. No detours, no search for Kirsten. Every step he took led downward, straight to safety. His account of rescuing her started to unravel. Meanwhile, the webcam footage circulated quietly among authorities. Analysts enhanced the images frame by frame. The haunting sight of two lights ascending and one descending alone told a story that words could barely capture. But when investigators cross-referenced timestamps with weather data and witness reports from other climbers, a horrifying realization emerged. Marcus had spent nearly an hour above the ridge with Kirsten, an hour, and temperatures plunging to minus 20 degrees Celsius.
Back at Innsbruck, prosecutors began to build their case. Every detail mattered. Friends of Kirsten recalled her excitement before the climb, her trust in Marcus's experience. Interviews revealed that she had been a novice climber, relying entirely on him for guidance. Emails and texts confirmed that he had meticulously planned the expedition, checking weather reports and mapping the route. His knowledge gave him power. His knowledge also gave him responsibility, and it appeared he had failed to uphold it. But just as the investigation seemed to point clearly toward negligence, a new, darker layer emerged. A witness, another mountaineer, reported seeing Marcus with Kirsten earlier in the climb, speaking sharply, almost aggressively. The tone, the body language, all suggested tension. Could this have been more than a tragic miscalculation? Could there have been anger, impatience, a cold disregard for her survival? Then came the discovery that would shock even seasoned investigators. In the snow, partially buried, lay a waterproof journal belonging to Marcus. Inside were meticulous notes about the climb, but one entry stood out.
dated the morning of the ascent. It contained a single cryptic sentence: "If she can't make it, she won't survive." The investigators stared at it in disbelief. Was this a premonition, or something far more sinister? As prosecutors and detectives pored over the evidence, it became clear that this was no ordinary accident. Every trail of footprints, every timestamp, every abandoned piece of gear painted a picture of betrayal in the harshest environment on the continent. And the mountain itself, towering and indifferent, had preserved the truth in its frozen silence. The world waited, breathless, as the case moved toward charges. But just as it seemed the story was reaching its peak, a new, darker layer surfaced. Someone else had been on the mountain that night. Someone who might have seen more than anyone expected. Before the trial even began, the Alpine community was abuzz. Everyone knew the footage. Everyone had seen the images of Kirsten's light fading into the storm while Marcus descended alone. But investigators now had a new variable. An anonymous witness who claimed to have seen the pair higher up on the ridge just hours before disaster struck. This witness, another climber sheltering in a small snow cave, had been documenting the ascent on a handheld camera. What emerged from their footage was chilling. Marcus and Kirsten arguing fiercely, voices barely audible over the wind. At one point, Marcus's gestures were aggressive, almost commanding. The witness later said, "He didn't seem worried about the snow or the mountain. He seemed frustrated with her, angry even." The prosecution pieced together a timeline. Kirsten, exhausted and hypothermic, had reached the point of no return. Marcus, armed with knowledge, strength, and planning, had choices, and he chose to leave her. The mountain's unforgiving cold did the rest. Yet the witness's footage introduced a new layer of complexity. There was a window, a moment, when rescue could have been possible. And that choice not made, prosecutors argued, was the line between tragic accident and criminal negligence. When Marcus was finally brought to court, the tension in the room was palpable. His demeanor, calm, almost detached, contrasted sharply with the grief-stricken families in the gallery. The jury listened to the webcam evidence, the GPS trails, the split board, the journal, and now the witness footage. Every detail, every freeze frame pointed toward a chilling conclusion. Marcus had abandoned Kirsten, leaving her to die in conditions any human could not survive. But just as the case seemed airtight, the defense revealed its bombshell. Another climber, a distant acquaintance of Marcus, testified that Kirsten had, earlier in the climb, insisted on pushing for the summit despite exhaustion. According to the testimony, Marcus had repeatedly warned her, tried to get her to turn back, and even offered shelter, which she refused. The courtroom collectively held its breath. Could this tragedy have been unavoidable? A collision of inexperience and nature's fury? The jury deliberated for hours, each detail scrutinized, each timeline replayed in their minds. Outside, the Alpine winds howled as if echoing the verdict. And then came the sentencing. Marcus was found guilty of grossly negligent manslaughter. The mountain claimed Kirsten, but the law claimed accountability. Yet even as the case closed, the haunting images from the webcam continued to circulate online, replayed by those who couldn't comprehend how a human could leave another to die in such circumstances. The split board, the journal, the last light disappearing into the darkness, these were the permanent imprints of a tragedy that would never be forgotten. Months later, climbers returning to Grossglockner reported an eerie feeling near the ridge where Kirsten had fallen. Some swore they saw a faint light, flickering like a headlamp in the distance, always just out of reach. Others whispered that the mountain itself was keeping watch, a silent testament to betrayal, hubris, and the thin line between survival and death. If this story was intense, hit subscribe, because the truth of human nature is far darker than any storm, and the mountains, they never lie.